We're gonna start this off with my most crucial tip for recording videos on Sony cameras, especially the Sony ZV-E1 or the Sony ZV-E10, and that is how to avoid overheating. In my opinion, these cameras have a bad reputation for overheating. Like, that's the first thing people ask about when it comes to making videos with them, but it's actually really avoidable if you use the right settings. Okay, so first off, you're gonna turn your camera on and press on the menu button. Navigate your way down to the yellow briefcase icon and tap down until you see the power setting option. Press down on the right button on the D-pad to get into this list, and then go down to auto power off temp and set it to high. It will give you this warning message that says the temperature of the device may rise to prioritize recording time. Would you like to change the setting? Just go ahead and press OK. So that's step one, and doing that alone will help a lot. But the next thing you want to do, when you're recording, you're going to get your camera all set up and ready to go. And just before you hit record, I want you to open up the little battery door here. It's hard to say exactly how big of an impact this has, but it does let a little more air get in around the battery, which this is the area where the camera really tends to heat up. And I found that it helps to extend the recording time before overheating. I've personally been able to film longer than 40 minutes continuously on both the ZVE-10 and the ZVE-1 in 4K. And when it comes to the ZVE-1 in particular, I've never had this camera overheat on me. So if you follow both of those steps, you shouldn't have any problems. Now that we've got that straightened out and we know that your camera isn't gonna overheat while you're trying to film, we can move on to my 6 other hacks that anybody shooting videos with a Sony camera needs to know. And by the way, if you're new here, hey, I'm Katie and I love to share tips for YouTubers around video creation here on my channel. And in addition to my channel, I'm also the founder of a small video editing agency called Creatorly Media. So if you ever need help with editing your videos, I'm your gal. Number 2, clear image zoom. Okay, this next tip is a bit of a money saver because it actually might help you not need to buy as many lenses as you think you do. When you turn on this setting, it essentially extends the range of your lens. So in the menu, look for a red camera icon to get to your video settings. Tap down until you see zoom, and inside that sub-menu, open zoom range and turn on clear image zoom. I recommend this over digital zoom because you'll actually preserve the quality of your image. Like if you turn on digital zoom and you zoom way in, it's not gonna look as good. Then, and we'll talk more about button customizations in a minute, don't worry, but I think it would be a good idea to map this button on the back of the camera to clear image zoom so you can easily punch in and get that extra range while you're filming. So to do that, open up the menu again and head down to that yellow briefcase icon and then select Operation Customize. Tab over into that list and find the custom key / dial set next to the little video camera icon, because here you can set custom buttons for both photo mode and video mode. So we're gonna choose video mode right now. I would set that number 1 button to be step zoom. That's how I have it set up, and it allows me to really quickly go into that clear image zoom mode and extend the range of my lens. I personally have the Sony 16 to 25 millimeter lens, and it kind of turns it into like a 24 to 40-ish millimeter lens when you turn on clear image zoom. Number 3, monitor brightness. So I'll be honest with you, one of my gripes with the ZVE-1 and the ZVE-10 is that they don't have a viewfinder. I love making travel vlogs when I go on vacation, and when you're filming out in the bright sunlight, it can sometimes be hard to see what the heck is going on your screen. But then I discovered this feature. Open up your menu, head over to that yellow briefcase icon again, and find the setting called monitor. Tab over to monitor brightness, and here you can toggle between manual, which is the default, and sunny weather. I know this might seem super obvious looking at it now, but it took me an embarrassingly long time to find out that this setting exists and that it actually makes a really big difference when you're filming outside. That being said, I wouldn't suggest leaving this on all the time because it's gonna use up your battery faster. And if you're in a more like dim lighting scenario, your screen's gonna look really bright and contrasty and you just don't need it to. So to help make switching easier, we'll move on to my next hack, which is number 4, set your custom buttons. In my opinion, feeling like an expert with your camera in large part comes down to knowing your custom buttons and having them set up to change the things that you want to change, so you're not always fiddling around in the menu to change your settings. And the way to do that is by customizing your buttons, which is really easy. And I'm also gonna show you the shortcuts that I have mapped in case you wanna copy mine, because I do think it is a pretty great setup for YouTubers. Once again, open up your settings, find that yellow briefcase and go to Operation Customize and find Video Custom Key / Dial Set. And let's go through all of my settings. Okay, so button number 1, Step Zoom. We talked about this before. It lets you take advantage of clear image zoom to get more focal range basically when you're filming. Next up, I have the second button, or like the little garbage button here, mapped to toggle between product showcase. This is a neat feature on both the ZVE-1 and the ZVE-10 that basically lets you change focus modes. The amazing thing about Sony cameras is how good their autofocus is, and it's always going to be locked right onto your face, particularly your eyes. And so because of that, if you've ever been filming a YouTube video and you want to show off a product, we all know the classic beauty guru move of holding it up to the camera and then like covering your face so that, you know, the camera will focus on the object. But basically product showcase mode allows you to not have to do all the funny face covering stuff, and you can just toggle into product showcase and it will lock onto whatever item you're holding up rather than your face. So I have it mapped onto this button, so while I'm filming I can really easily reach around the camera, find this little button here, press it, and then I know if I hold something up, the camera will focus on that. It's just important that you remember to turn this back off afterwards. It still will focus on your face even if you're in this mode and you're not holding anything up, but the autofocus will obviously be a lot better if you turn off product showcase mode when you want it to focus on your face. So just remember that. Moving on to the third button here, continuing on the theme of focus. I've got this set to autofocus / manual focus selector toggle. So basically while I'm filming, I can press this center button here to switch between autofocus and manual focus. 99% of the time, I just want my camera in autofocus. It does a really great job of focusing on what I want it to, but there are a few specific situations where I might want the focus to stay locked on one thing, even if like I'm moving through the frame, for example. So in those cases, I'll set my camera up, I'll frame up the scene, I'll probably use autofocus or just tap on my screen to select what I want the camera to focus on, and then I'll switch it over to manual focus, which means the focus is not gonna change now, it'll stay the same. Or of course, I can use my focus ring on the lens to really dial in exactly what I wanna be focused on. And then I can like move through the scene, do my thing, and know that the focus will remain locked. Next up, we've got number 4, that's like the left button here. I have this set to monitor brightness, which we were just talking about. Basically, this means if I'm vlogging and I'm inside and then I go outside, I can quickly change my monitor brightness over to sunny weather so I can still see what I'm filming. Number 5, that's the right button here. I have this set to ISO. By default on the ZVE-1, if you scroll on this like thumb wheel here, you'll change your shutter speed. And if you scroll on this wheel up here by like the shutter button, you'll change your aperture. And so this right-hand button ISO, this is the default mapping, by the way. You can press that to change your ISO. So you have the ability to, at your fingertips here, change all of those components of manual exposure really easily. Finally, number 6, this down arrow here, I have set to auto white balance lock toggle. Basically, this means if I press this, I can lock my auto white balance in where the camera has set it in this moment, and it's not gonna change. This is helpful if you're filming like a really long clip, for example, and maybe it's like a cloudy day and the sun kind of keeps changing a bit. You don't want your image to continually like change colors, so you can lock in your white balance where the camera found it when you started recording. Okay, the last ones I'll mention here are the top buttons. So this number 2 button here, this is just like the big red button on the top of the camera. I've left this to movie shooting because I think that just makes sense, but the one that I did change is this number 1 button, and I have this mapped to shoot mode. By default, this is the button for like background defocus, and I just personally don't like using the background defocus mode. I would rather just change my aperture manually if I want to have a blurry background. So instead, I have this button mapped to shoot mode, which means when I press it, I can switch between intelligent auto mode or manual or aperture priority or shutter priority. Realistically, the only two that I ever really use are manual and full-on intelligent auto. When I'm recording videos like this, where I set up the camera and I talk to it for like several minutes at a time, I always do that in manual so I can dial in my shutter speed, my aperture, my ISO myself. But if I'm vlogging and I'm walking around with the camera, I'm usually just doing that in auto mode, because if you're changing between like a shady spot and a bright sunny spot, it's just easier to let the camera set the exposure for you, and I find it does a really good job. Now, pretty much for the rest of the buttons, I just leave them at their default, and I really think that everything that I've mapped here, these are the key things that you're gonna want easy access to when you're filming videos. So if you don't know where to start with your custom buttons, I recommend just copy what I have. It works really well for me. Number 5, the custom function menu. In addition to all the custom buttons on the back of your camera that you can map, you can also change what menu pops up when you press on the FN or function button. To change this, once again, you go to the yellow briefcase menu, you find Operation Customize, and you're gonna select FN menu settings. The top section here is the function menu for when you're in photo mode, and the one below is for video mode. So that's the one we're gonna focus on now. Okay, first up, I have my first slot set to steady shot. By pressing this, I can change between active steady shot, turning steady shot off, or my favorite dynamic active steady shot. Next up, we got the audio record level. Here I can adjust basically how loud or quiet I want the camera to be recording audio at, depending on the scenario I'm in. Next is picture profile. So if I would like to, on the rare occasion, if I'm honest, shoot in S-Log or like S-Cinetone, this is how I can change that. Most of the time, I just shoot with picture profile completely off. Recognition target, this lets you select what kind of thing you want the camera to autofocus on. I leave this set to human, like all of the time. But if I was trying to film animals or whatever, I could change it there. Next is focus mode. That's self-explanatory. Again, I have a custom button map to switch automatically between autofocus and manual focus, but I could do it by going into the function menu as well. The next one is grid lines. This one I do like to have on a lot of the time, so I can use the rule of thirds or make sure that my horizon is straight. The next slot is for white balance. So I have this set to auto white balance 99% of the time, but by going into the function menu here, I could switch over to, daylight or shade or whatever. In the next slot, we have the zebra display. So this setting allows you to turn on zebras, which are basically these lines that will show up on anything that's overexposed. So this can just be really helpful at making sure that you're not blowing out your highlights and you're keeping your exposure correct. In the next slot, I have my auto framing. So here I can turn auto framing on and off. This is a really neat feature specific to the ZVE-1. Basically, it means I can set up this camera on a tripod, turn on auto framing, and I can move around in the scene and the camera will automatically frame it, tracking me. Relevant to that, my next slot is the framing tracking speed. So here I can change like how quickly I want that box to move as it follows me basically. So I just keep that set to 2, but of course you can adjust it as needed. Next up, I've got the self timer. I don't use this very often because famously with video, you can just cut off the beginning if you hit record and then walk away from the camera. But you can do this if you're trying to go like really far from the camera and you don't want, the extra footage that you don't need. So you can set a self timer here. And finally, in my last slot, I have the focus map. So you can turn this on, especially if you are, using that product showcase mode or you're doing manual focus and you just really want to double check that the thing that you want to be in focus is in focus. This will show you. So pretty much the stuff that's in focus won't have any colors on it. And then the things that are like way in the background will be in blue. Anything that's like too close to the camera to be in focus will be highlighted in red. Hack number 6, you can rename your video files. This next tip will be really useful for video creators that are shooting their videos with multiple cameras, specifically multiple Sony cameras. In my case, there are times when I'm filming a video using my Sony ZV-E1, my ZV-E10, and my ZV-1. Yes, all these names get confusing, but by default, all these Sony cameras, the video file they create is going to be named like C00 blah blah blah. The rest of the numbers in series. And so that means when I bring files from all of my different Sony cameras onto my computer, they all have the same naming convention, which is C followed by a series of numbers. This can get kind of confusing, and so I find it really helpful to customize the video file name in camera so I can distinguish between, which camera these video files came from. So the way to do that is in your menu, once again, look for that red camera icon, head over to the file sub menu, then go ahead and enter the file settings menu and look for title name settings. Here you can enter a custom title for your file names. So I've chosen to make it the name of the camera. So in this case, it's ZVE1 followed by a dash to separate the title from the series of numbers. That series of numbers is just gonna be the order in which the clips were taken. So the very first video clip that you take on this camera, it'll be like 00001, and then the next one will be like 00002, and so on. So that helps you keep them in chronological order as well. But now your video file names will be easily associated with each different camera you're filming with. And hack number 7, the hot shoe mount. This one is less of a setting and more of just a really helpful physical feature that I don't want you to sleep on when it comes to your Sony camera. And that is the hot shoe mount, which is here on top of the camera. This mounting point on top of the camera actually has like an electrical connection point. So you can plug things in and not have to use any cables to do it. For example, one of my favorite microphones to use with this camera is the Sony ZV-E1. And as you can see, there's no wires with this. It just slides into the hot shoe mount and it connects that way. So I don't need to plug in any cords to the audio jack. It just automatically works. I can also do that with my DJI Mic 2 receiver. So I have this little adapter here. I can really easily connect the adapter to this mic receiver, and then I can slide it on and connect it via the hot shoe. I know it's kind of a small thing, but it really is more convenient than having all these cables dangling around, especially if you're vlogging and you want to turn this monitor around and not have like wires in the way. With all of these settings dialed in, you are ready to get out there and start shooting with your Sony camera. By the way, if you want help editing all the videos that you're about to go out there and film, like I mentioned before, I have a small team of video editors. We're currently taking on more YouTube editing clients. You can go to creatorlymedia.com to see all the details. Or if hiring someone to help you with editing isn't quite in your budget just yet, you can check out this video that I made about the best free editing software for YouTubers. So go ahead and watch that one next. And as always, I hope that you're having adventures and following your dreams. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.